everyone. Welcome to Consensus Technologies, How to Automate Your Identity Threat Detection and Response Capabilities webinar. At any time, if you have any questions or anything you'd like to ask us, please put it into the chat and we'll get to you as best we can. Otherwise, we can follow up with you afterwards. All right. What we do. For those of you not familiar with Consensus Technologies, we are based near Pittsburgh, PA, and work in three core areas: identity and access management, user provisioning, access management, and privileged access management. Cybersecurity, which covers penetration testing, vulnerability scanning, and cyber awareness training. Managed services. Everything we do is available as a managed service where we can be your IT staff, act as your primary engineer for identity and access management. We can be your cybersecurity team or manage your security operations center. The NIST cybersecurity framework helps organizations of all sizes better understand, manage, and reduce their cybersecurity risk and protect their networks and data. The framework is organized into 5 main areas: identify, protect, detect, respond, and recover. In our August webinar, we presented brief overviews for a number of these areas. In January, we did a deep dive into multi-factor authentication. If you are interested in either of these webinars, we've included links to the sessions on our resources page at the end of this presentation. They are also available under the Events tab in the Consensus web page. Today, we're focusing on identity threat detection and response in the Security Operations Center. Presenting today, Cody Hansen, Senior Identity and Access Management Engineer, presenting identity integration and open text technologies. Aaron Zajac, Senior Cybersecurity Analyst, discussing EDR solutions, including Microsoft Defender and SentinelOne. Russ Bell, CISSP, Senior Identity and Access Management Engineer, and Architect, discussing additional ITDR concepts and how rapid identity from identity automation works in a SOC environment. Finally, there's myself, Mike Weaver. I'm the Vice President of Development. I am your host and presenting an introduction to today's topics. Together, the presentation team has over 90 years of experience in the IT, identity, and cybersecurity realms, so you're in good hands this afternoon. Starting off, I'd like to talk about why we're here. These days, we've been finding that all of our services, our major features and functions, the things we provide to our customers, our students, our clients, our business partners, are moving into the cloud, especially since the lockdowns of the COVID era and other trends have led to these sorts of services just being available online. To provide them online from cloud providers, which are usually not our own IT systems, we are needing to move our users, employees, customers, staff, and students into their own accounts in these cloud services. Securing these services and these identities is one of the biggest issues that we're facing today. It is a growing and emerging trend in cybersecurity to deal with identity-based threats. Those identity threats are currently one of the largest source of risks, and most of the breaches these days are coming from compromises or identity risks. Fundamentally, the big risk that you see with identity is the difference between who we think is behind an account versus who actually is. You may think it's, the person from accounting, but it's could be somebody who's a threat actor, a bad individual trying to do something wrong in your environment. Some of the threats of identity could be that the intruders might attempt inappropriate privilege escalation. They might attempt lateral movement within your environment. They may compromise additional accounts, and they may specifically target or predate unmonitored or unmanaged accounts, such as admin accounts or machine-specific or service-specific accounts. The current threats we see are combination of old school attacks, such as phishing and spear phishing, device theft or takeover, including the actual literal theft of physical devices left in cars and backpacks and things like that, Account sharing, where an account is used by multiple people to do a job function versus having an account per person. Loss or exposure of their credentials, either through internal breaches or Trojan software, malware. Changing of their group memberships within the organization or within the service, possibly leading to an inappropriate change in their job permissions, their role information, giving them potentially excessive access. So in this environment comes the idea of ITDR, Identity Threat Detection and Response. It is the integration of two core practices: the identity and access management environment, which is responsible for handling your identities, provisioning, deprovisioning, changes in the account lifecycle, as well as controlling access to key resources, and EDR or XDR, the extended detection and response systems, which largely handles your endpoints, the workstations, the devices, network equipment, and so forth. The XDR EDR solutions typically integrate with a security operations center to allow for reporting and for management. Using an idea called SOAR, the SOAR framework, integrating these items in the ITDR allows for an adaptive response to identity threats. A good ITDR solution allows you to do proactive defense and reactive defense. On the proactive side, you can have the identity system communicate back up to the security center, probing of credentials, the trying of doorknobs, multiple attempted logins or things like that. You can also use that to create an adaptive authentication level according to perceived risk, device fingerprinting, leading to additional authentication requirements, such as multi-factor authentication and so forth. Reactive behavior can include responding to a breach detection, and unusual behavior on an account or an identity, allowing you to lock it down, change its permissions, change its password, suspend it, add additional tests to that account to log in, and so forth. Some of the ITDR technologies that our team is going to present to you today will include Pillar, which fulfills the role of a security operations center, Endpoint Extended Detection and Response, Microsoft Defender and SentinelOne are products that work in that space. Identity and access management includes OpenText Identity Manager and Identity Automations, Rapid Identity. All of these are best of breed software solutions that we have expertise in. Well, I'd like to introduce Russ Bell, CISSP, to talk about SOC, SOAR, and SIEM, as well as eventually Rapid Identity. Thank you.
Great. Thanks a lot, Mike. I'm going to discuss some foundational concepts for ITDR, starting with the Security Operations Center, or SOC. And this is not just another name for the IT department, although some organizations treat it that way. But what it is a resource or resources dedicated to the detection and prevention of cyber attacks. It's very security focused. And what that looks like has changed over the years. What it used to look like, if you've ever seen a war room in a movie with the big wall-sized TVs and dots all over the globe, that is actually what they used to be. I remember about 23 years ago, good grief, I was taken on a tour of a large company SecOps center, and it was just like the movies. There was a big room full of people wearing headsets, just staring at the massive monitors with green and yellow and red dots all over the place. And nowadays, it can just be a dashboard on a cloud app that people in widespread locations can log into. And that app is the Security Operations Center. We'll be taking a look at one such product later in the presentation. Next, I'll talk about SOAR. SOAR, what is SOAR? Okay. SOAR is a process or strategy of using different technologies to identify and respond to security threats. The term was first coined by Gartner, but it's been adopted industry-wide. NIST published a special publication on it, a guide to a secure enterprise network landscape, if you want to look that up. So what does it mean? Let's start with orchestration. Orchestration is a word you didn't hear often in this context until a few years ago, and there seem to be a lot of ideas for what exactly it means. Other people's definitions that I've seen is threat and vulnerability management, incident triage, intelligence feed monitoring. How I like to picture, visualize it comes from the word itself. It's like an orchestra conductor. Have you ever heard an orchestra warm up? It's just this cacophony of random arpeggios, and each instrument's kind of practicing its own little part, and it just sounds like a bunch of noise. And the information gathered by all the different systems in your environment is like that. And the orchestra director takes all of these disparate feeds and harmonizes them into good threat intelligence. Automation is exactly what it sounds like. It uses intelligence and workflow, sometimes called playbooks, as a term you'll hear a lot in SOAR, to automatically perform tasks that would have been done by humans. And then response is the execution of the actions taken to address the threat. This might be to disable a user, to quarantine a workstation, to send a notification. Depending on the sophistication of your source suite, a response could be generated from basic configurations or complex code. So basically, orchestration is information harmonization. Automation is decision making, and then response is the action taken.
Russ, I have a question.
Sure.
How does SOAR integrate with your SecOps center?
Okay, SOAR is basically a methodology that a security operations center will use to develop its security strategy to deal with threats. If you have modern SOC software, it will have the capability to incorporate SOAR concepts in its functionality.
Thank you.
Next, let's talk about SIM. I've heard it pronounced 17 different ways. I'm going to say SIM. The acronym stands for Security, Information, and Event Management. SIM basically provides visibility into your security position situation by information gathering. It will collect logs, and some SIM software can do some basic filtering by scanning for keyword. Some can store and index logs so you can do queries against them. SIM basically makes information available for analysis. So when integrated with SOAR, it becomes a powerful defensive tool. The distinction between SIM and SOAR, basically SIM is passive, where SOAR is active. So SIM gathers information, funnels it to the security operations center, and then SOAR uses intelligence to act on the data and information provided by the SIM. So next, let's define EDR and XDR. The DR in both of them is the same as in ITDR. It's detection and response. EDR is endpoint detection and response. XDR is extended detection and response. Technically, they're both EDR, but to avoid confusion, EDR and XDR. The endpoints referred to in EDR are usually physical devices. So EDR monitors those devices, watching for possible threat actors who may be compromising them. The extended part of XDR means going beyond just physical devices and monitoring the entire environment, including the links between the devices and your cloud presence. XDR products often include an EDR component, and both of them, in addition to monitoring, have the ability to have predefined responses. So now, to do a deeper dive into EDR and XDR, I'm going to hand off to the one and only Aaron Zajac.
Thanks, Russ. I'll be talking about two EDR solutions, the first of which is going to be Microsoft Defender. It's composed of 4 different components. There's Defender for Endpoint, for Office 365, for Identity, and for Cloud Apps. That last one, Cloud Apps, I'm not going to be talking about very much. All you need to know for right now, though, is that it's a solution for protecting your third-party applications that are hosted up in Azure, but it's not really within the purview of this webinar. Defender's composed of an EDR, endpoint detection and response, XDR, extended detection and response, and a SIM, security information and event management. It provides a single pane of glass to aggregate all of your security and events and alerts in one place. That way, you don't have to go to all of your different security devices and components to see the events. You can just look at them in a single place. In that one pane of glass, it provides real-time monitoring, as well as automated investigation and remediation, so that in the event that there is some sort of breach or some sort of incident going on, they'll be investigating and working to remediate it before you might even be seeing those events on your end. They also provide integration with third-party tools such as Syslog or really any other tool that you might be using in your environment. So now let's talk more specifically about Defender for Endpoint. It provides clients for Microsoft Windows, Mac OS, and Linux, so it should cover most of the endpoints in your environment. Like I mentioned before, it's real-time EDR and event monitoring so that it will know exactly what's going on in your environment and can provide that automated investigation or remediation as quickly as possible. One big thing is vulnerability management. In each environment, it can be difficult to keep track of every single operating system, every single piece of software that's going on. So what they do is they keep inventory, keep track of all of that, and give you a security score for each device, as well as the environment as a whole, to give you a quick glance of what you need to remediate and improve in order to get your environment more secure. Next, we'll talk about Defender for Office 365. This comes with two plans. Plan 1 is monitoring in your email for zero-day malwares, phishing attempts, compromised accounts. It monitors for those things and alerts you to it, so that in the event that they do come up, it gives you ample time to investigate and remediate it. Then there's Plan 2 for a slightly increased price, and that provides attack simulation training and phishing simulations to help you prepare your users in the event that someone is trying to breach into the network. It also provides investigation, hunting, and response in the event that there is a breach to help you get the threat actor out of your environment, and as well as automated response to help you be a bit more hands-off on that. The third and final part of Defender that I'll be talking about is Defender for Identity. This protects and helps you further shore up your defenses within your identity provider, such as Azure AD. It helps you to reduce the attack surface to keep that as smooth as possible, so that there aren't a bunch of rough nooks and crannies for an attacker to get into. It also provides what's called a lateral movement path. And what this is the way that an attacker might get into your environment and increase their credentials.
Aaron, quick question. Could you explain to me a little more about what lateral movement paths are?
Yeah. Like I said, lateral movement path, it's a way that the attacker would get into and increase their permissions. One example of this is they might try to get into the network through someone like an office manager. And they might not necessarily go directly for a network admin, because those network admins would be much more aware of good security practices, but an office manager might not. But they could possibly still have admin credentials on a couple servers. Once they get access to that generic user account, they would then access a server that user might have admin on, and then using something like credential dumping, they'll get further permissions within your environment. What this will do is allow them to achieve what's called domain dominance, which is the full control over your entire environment. Defender for Identity does have monitoring for this domain dominance. It also has monitoring for compromised credentials, whether that's within your environment or in the many databases that are out there on the dark web. So that's all for Microsoft Defender. The second EDR solution that I'll talk about is Sentinel-1. It's an EDR and XDR, just like Microsoft Defender. And it has endpoint agents for Windows, Mac OS, Linux, as well as Kubernetes for Linux. So if you do have Kubernetes in your environment, this could be a great solution for you. Like before, it's that same centralized management with a single pane of glass to see all of your alerts and events in one place. They also have what's called Purple AI. Purple AI is something that they've developed in-house. It's an AI to automate the detection, remediation, as well as hunting and response to provide a bit more accuracy, as well as a bit more investigation for things that might be unfamiliar. One key point is the bidirectional integration with a wide variety of SOC solutions. And I'll show that a little bit later, but it's pretty common for EDRs to send alerts to a SOC for investigation. However, it also allows for that SOC to send commands and actions back that SentinelOne will perform. So now let's go ahead and get to a demo. I'll go ahead and start with a demo of creating a workflow. The first thing that we want to do with creating a workflow is assign it to a customer. And we'll name it something like test malware detection. Next, we want to set a trigger. This trigger is going to be a malware is detected. Once we set that, we will set an action. The first action that we'll set is remediate the threat. This is going to remediate the malicious software, the malware that was detected, and remove it from that device. Then we'll set pillar to wait for 1 minute. This will be to allow that remediation to happen. After that wait, we're going to set it to check the mitigation status and set the mitigation type to remediate. Assuming that it was mitigated, we're going to run a scan on that endpoint through SentinelOne. This will allow us to discover any other things that might have been there that might not have been immediately detected. Assuming it wasn't mitigated, we are going to isolate that endpoint. What this will allow us to do is completely cut off that endpoint from the network and not allow it to infect any other devices or servers on that network. That integration is going to be SentinelOne, and we'll set it to 5 days. 5 days will be long enough that in the event that we don't get to it immediately, it's not going to come back onto the network. But if we forget to bring it back on the network after remediating manually, it'll come back on within a reasonable amount of time. We can also have other branches to this workflow tree. One example is escalating to the SOC. This will escalate it directly to Pillar, and they'll put eyes on it and investigate it on their end. We might not want every single malware to go directly to Pillar, though, so we can set it to send email notifications to ourselves so that we can be aware of every single event and correlate things so that we can see patterns on our own end. And we'll just make the message something like malware detected. So this is a view of all of the actions within our workflow. If we want it to be actioned, we just select unmarked draft, but now we can save it. So that was an overview of how a workflow is created. There are a lot of different workflows that can be done. It's a very robust system that can allow you to automate quite a few things. So now here is a demo of how SentinelOne and Pillar will interact with each other in that bidirectional manner like I discussed earlier. This is just a Windows test VM. The first thing I'm going to do is download the iCar test file. It's not a malicious software. However, it's something that all antiviruses and EDRs should recognize. We can see that it was immediately detected as a malicious file by Sentinel-1. And we can see that it was mitigated immediately as well. Now that just went to the downloads folder, and I imagine Sentinel-1 is constantly looking in the downloads folder pretty hard. But that's an example of how quickly it can detect things. Now let's bring over the Sentinel-1 dashboard, and we can see that it was detected and showing in the dashboard. We can see the path here of where that file was. We can see the type of threat, what device it was on. It gives us a lot of information. Now let's bring over the pillar dashboard. And we can see that the alert is in pillar. We can see that same path, that same device gives us the threat type and classification, all that same information. So we're not having to go to Sentinel-1 just to see everything. Pillar gives it to us. We can also tell Pillar to tell Sentinel-1 to run a scan on that endpoint. And that's, again, that bidirectional communication. And we'll give Sentinel-1 a minute and go back over to there. And we'll take a look at our sentinels or agents. They're called sentinels within Sentinel-1. We'll click on our test device. And we can see here that a full scan is in progress. So that should allow us to detect any other possible malicious things that were going on that device that may not have been picked up immediately. So that's one example of how the bidirectional access works, and as well as the workflows. So now I'm going to pass it over to Cody Hansen, who's going to talk about identity integration.
Excellent. Thanks, Aaron. So it's important to maintain the mindset of ITDR. And identity access and management products offer ways to achieve this goal of identity threat detection and response. Some example products that we manage in-house at Concensus are OpenText Identity Manager and Identity Automation Rapid Identity. I do just want to briefly point out they've actually rebranded the cybersecurity suite of products with OpenText back to NetIQ. So that's why we have that name back in our moniker again. These products manage identities that are provisioned across multiple accounts and products. There are, of course, threat risks involved with IAM products when identities are not correctly managed or configured, namely credential misuse, identities that may be shared or used by multiple users, erroneous privilege escalation, when the accounts and resources that an identity has assigned to it are erroneously modified, or even account takeover of any unmanaged identities. An ITDR mindset and environment can assist with these security risks when they happen, prevent them from happening in the first place, or even remediate them if they do happen. Next, it's important to go over all the important and useful data for ITDR. Each of these platforms can provide a wide range of data that can help mitigate the risks within each environment. And some of these examples include suspicious IP activity, changes in SOD or separation of duties or permissions when changes occur on an identity that are not expected or planned, and erroneous password changes. Data for all password changes can help identify any unexpected or risk-based password behavior. Recovery challenge questions. If a user has them in their environment, there may be some unexpected behavior as changes to those answers. Tracking this data will help identify any of those unexpected changes. And repetitive failed login. This can, of course, point to a brute force attack or credential exposure. Later on in this webinar, I actually plan to show how Pillar SOC or any other SOC should be able to work against this kind of threat and alert and how it can behave when those come in. The next following 3 slides I'd like to cover is preventing, detecting, and responding to various IAM-related threats. The first being prevention. These are 3 factors that are probably some of the most useful. There are other ways we can, of course, find ways to prevent. The first I'd like to cover is sanitizing identities. There are countless accounts that can become orphaned or simply forgotten without the appropriate controls in place. And taking the time to clean those up can help prevent any of those extra entry points from being compromised. Multi-factored authentication. Recent years have forced many companies, schools, and government entities to utilize MFA. I've personally been a part of several implementations in the last couple of years, especially with schools. If you're not already using it, I definitely strongly encourage that you try and make it a part of your ITDR solution.
Cody, I have a question about that. Could
Sure.
you tell me how multi-factor authentication can improve the security in the environment?
Yeah, so MFA can provide an extra reinforcement to user login so that when suspicious activity occurs, if other authentication factors are not used in tandem with a standard login, it can be considered a risk or attempt at account takeover. So to be more specific would be, if a user is correctly enrolled into MFA as required by your environment, when they enter in their standard login credentials, they'll be prompted to approve that login either via email, authenticator app, SMS, even phone call. There's a wide variety of methods that they can approve that login in tandem with their standard login, and that will help prove the authenticity of the login. It also gives a user control to identify and deny any of these logins if it's something that they're not familiar with.
Thank you.
So thank you for that question, Mike. Correcting any other misconfigurations is another useful way we can help prevent. A common way to configure identities in IAM is using RBAC or ABAC design. These stand for roles-based access control or attribute-based access control. If the design for either of those is outdated or unmanaged, then the access to downstream environments can be inaccurate or a risk. And it's just important to make sure that those configurations are valid. Password policy design can obviously be constantly updated and make sure that they're assigned to the appropriate people within an environment. And then any other missing authorization controls. You may have MFA in the environment, but if it's not appropriately assigned to who needs it, then these are just many examples of ways we can correct those misconfigurations. Next, I'd like to cover the detection within IAM. IAM may have many tools to identify itself when a risk arrives, but there are also other ways of managing and knowing how to compile all that information. A SOC, as previously mentioned in this webinar, can effectively compile and sort all alerts and risks within an IAM environment as well into one convenient location. It can provide real-time alerts and logs, which can be beneficial during the response stage of ITDR. Anomalous activity, namely specific IPs identified as suspicious, accounts that should not be shared but show multiple login locations, or even accounts presumed new and unexpected are all examples of some anomalous activity that can occur in an environment. Risk scoring scales can be especially useful. Many SOC programs, like Pillar SOC, for example, have a risk analysis done on all environments and alerts. These are weighed not just in numeric values, but in a severity level as well. Using these scoring scales can help us identify when something is a higher threat than another, giving you flexibility on how to handle all the incoming risk alerts. And then thirdly, with responding to any threats, IAM threats, they can be handled in a variety of ways. If you utilize a SOC to affect downstream changes, they can be handled through ticket generation and tracking, containing and/or eradicating threats. Through SOC tools and integrations, you can automatically operate upon the alerts that come in and can contain the threats automatically or even manually. Assist with investigation and analysis of cause. Detailed logs of each event can assist with post-mortem and additional analysis to engage in future preventative or detection measures to avoid the risk in the future. And then, of course, scheduled reporting features can provide other information that may not be picked up by standard alerts. Mitigation within IAM itself can, of course, be beneficial as well. Some things to consider would be manual account identity lockdown, either through forcing password changes, disabling the account, or even complete removal of the account if required. access revocation of an affected identity. Procedure can require to have an identity's rights and access revoked. This can assist in mitigating the risk of access that a compromised account may have. Additionally, some measures can be made to have temporary access to prevent this kind of risk in the first place. And then quarantining and isolation. While this mostly can tie into account lockdown, there may be other methods which we can use to effectively quarantine account. And quarantining often allows us to have a better access and insight into getting ourselves a cause analysis to be accurately performed. So from here, I'd like to cover a brief demo of how PillarSock can handle some of these alerts. This diagram will just kind of quickly go over what the demo entails. I have some previously prepared endpoint that will watch to see if too many failed attempts happen on an account. Windows itself will, of course, do a lockdown through the lockdown policy, but through SOAR, which again is just a methodology, not necessarily a protocol, we'll basically send this alert to Pillar, and we can automate some responses to that alert to handle it downstream from there. So let's go ahead and show that. All right. So here in Pillar, I'd like to just briefly point out that there's two alerts that came in just in my preparation, just to show how much it's actually watching for in an environment. They're both considered low risk, but still just something that it takes the time to track to make sure we're aware. It was because I was modifying that lockout policy to lock in an account after 5 attempts, and it notified me that someone made those changes, and it's useful to have that kind of information in some respects. So from here, over on the Windows endpoint that I have, I've got a user named webinar user that I will incorrectly log in 5 times. And you'll see that happen here. As it goes through these, obviously that count will go up, and it'll find that I've done it wrong 4 times, and Windows itself will hesitate and, of course, complain because we don't want this happening too often. Let's see, we've got. And now we can see that the account was locked out as we expected. Now, just something to keep in mind, the whole point of ITDR and SOAR is all these different independent actions that can happen. Windows is certainly a part of this as well. It's taking the time to lock down the account for us, and then Pillar will just utilize the alert that comes from this endpoint that we can do some other actionable work as well. So we'll come back over here in Pillar, and we see 2 different alerts. The first is user account locked, as expected, because they had too many incorrect logins. But upon my testing for this demo, it also noticed I've been doing this too many times. And there's a second alert talking about 3 different lockouts. On this first alert, we can see a bunch of different references that'll let us utilize and review if we want to understand why it considers it a risk. To go back to the 3 login lockouts in 24 hours, this also has, again, it's identified it as a potential brute force attack. It will help us identify a way to answer this kind of threat coming into the environment. Now from here, I pre-built a workflow, not nearly as detailed as what Aaron demonstrated earlier. All it will do is just on an alert when a user account is locked, I would like to receive a notification. Now these alerts come into Pillar no matter what, but if I'd like to have some greater visibility on it, we can identify an email notification so it comes to me right away. And I'll be able to pull up here in a moment that shows that I did in fact receive this email. It came from Pillar, and it gives me the details of this particular alert and the message that I designed inside of that workflow itself. And then I can decide how to manually act on this from there. Now from here, I'd like to actually pass off to Russ. He's going to show a demo himself on how rapid identity will integrate with PillarSock.
Great, thanks, Cody. Identity Automation actually has a new partnership with Pillar. So they're going to package Pillar as a module within their Rapid Identity product. So you won't need a separate license for Pillar. You can get everything through Identity Automation. And I'm going to do a demo, and you'll notice that the version of Pillar that's integrated with Rapid Identity is missing the workflow section that Aaron and Cody just showed you. That's because the workflow or the intelligence will be done by Rapid Identity's Connect module, which is very configurable. If you're not familiar with the Connect module, it's a coding/scripting environment, so you can respond with anything that you have the coding chops to develop. And I'm going to be using a user called Russ Help Desk for this demo, and I have it set up to use Pictograph for authentication. And the way I remember the pictograph is with the phrase, I watch football on Thanksgiving. So if you hear me muttering some combination of those words, that's what that's about. So let's start the demo. And let me show you an example of what would cause an alert in Pillar. First, here's if you notice here, we don't have the workflows that were in the other instances, the other tenants of Pillar. And so let's go to Rapid ID, and I'm logged into Rapid ID as an admin right now. So we're going to take a look at this Russ Help Desk user, and you can see that the account is not disabled. So it's an active account. And with Rapid Identity, I actually have a connector coded to integrate with Google. So if we go and look in Google, we'll see the exact same user, and we can see that it's active there in Google as well. So now I'm going to go back to Rapid Identity. I'm going to log out as the admin user, and I'm going to log in as this Russ Help Desk user. And what I'm going to do to trigger an alert is first I'm going to log in here locally in Hawaii. I'm located in Hawaii, so I'm going to log in just on my workstation here. And then I'm going to log in, I'm going to turn on my VPN and log in from California. So football Thanksgiving. Okay, so here I'm logged in, I'm going to log back out. And now I'm turning on my VPN. And now this login is going to show as a login from California. Football, watch, Thanksgiving. And I'm logged in here. So now, this is, if we go back to Pillar, we hit refresh, it actually dynamically refreshes, but if I hit the refresh button, it speeds it along. You can see already before it loads up in the top left that there's one alert. And when it comes up, we'll be able to see that that alert is login from new country, which I'll talk about that a little bit later, but it threw the alert, right? This is suspicious behavior. It flagged it as suspicious behavior. So going back, let's go back to Rapid ID. And I'm going to log back in as my admin user. And let's take a look at our Russ Help Desk user. And we can see that now the account is disabled. So this user cannot log in to Rapid Identity, but also since we've got the integration with Google through Rapid Identity, if we refresh our Google page, we'll be able to see that it's suspended in Google as well. So the user cannot log into Google either. And if we go back to Rapid Identity, and I'm going to hit the refresh on Rapid Identity, we're going to see that there's a task notification up in the top right-hand corner. And if we look at this, we see Russ Help Desk may be compromised or maybe a VPN user. Please verify. So we're going to go to the requests module. and look at our tasks. We see the task there. We'll select it and click approve, and then we have some options. And this is not pre-built. I coded this, so you're not confined to these choices. You can do whatever you want here, but what I've set up is enable account, force a password change, require multi-factor authentication for this user, or add this user to VPN users so that this alert won't come up for this user again. I'm going to select everything except force password change and then hit approve. And now let's go take a look at our user again here in Rapid Identity. And we can see that again, it's not disabled. So the user can now log back into Rapid Identity. And if we refresh the page here in Google, we can see it's active in Google again through the integration. And also, since I checked add this user to, or require MFA for this user, if I go back, I'm going to log out from Rapid ID as the admin user. I'm going to log back in again with my Rust Help Desk user. And it'll come up at first with the same pictograph that I normally use. Watch football, Thanksgiving. But now it also texted a code to my phone, which I'll enter in here. And so now I'm required to use 2 factors when I authenticate. And that's it. Great. So there are actually a lot of alerts Rapid Identity's integration with Pillar uses. And here's a list of some of them if you want to look through those. This is still in the QA phase of development, so there may be more when it's released. I want to touch on the alert that I used. Log in from new country. I didn't log in from a different country. I logged in from Hawaii and California. This alert will trigger when the location metadata has changed and the calculated velocity between the location of the 2 logins is over 200 miles per hour. So that could be, that could have been California and Arizona, it could have been LA and San Francisco, right? So they may change the name of that before release, but whatever they call it, it's definitely suspicious behavior. So it's a good alert to have. And to wrap up, I'm going to pass it back over to Mike Weaver.
Thank you, Russ. I hope that we've shown you today that a combination of identity and access management, endpoint management, and with the Security Operations Center makes for a much more secured environment. And it is the essence of what we call ITDR. What is new here, what we're bringing to the table is the IAM system integration, where it acts not only as a source of intelligence, risk data, potential threat and progress data, but also as an effector of change, remediation, and control. We can accept commands into IAM from a SOC and allow us to mitigate, manage, and control and stop these breaches as they occur. The key here is having a strong identity and access management portion of your network integrated with a well-designed SOC and good endpoint management. If you want to set up any or all of these things in your environment, we would be happy to help you. We are experts in this. Thank you for taking the time to talk to us. Here are some resources you might find useful in the future. Our previous webinars that we mentioned earlier. Other reading you might enjoy that will help build on the topics that we presented here today. If you have any questions, please reach out to us. And again, thank you for joining us.